agility of the software development. So, with that all said, let's go to Q&A here. Let's see. I had a question here at the beginning. This is worth just mentioning, and this comes up via email too. But somebody asked about when is the webinar due to start, and they gave their local time zone. There are a lot of time zones in the world. We do this webinar for free, and we're happy to provide this as a free service. But there are plenty of free resources on the internet that will convert time zones for you. So when the webinar says when the webinar invitation says that it starts at 1 p.m. Central Time in the United States, we're in the United States, you're going to need to take the initiative to figure out what that means in terms of your local time, because it's just not something that we're going to be able to do is tell the hundreds of attendees, okay, so in your local time it starts here, and in your local time it starts here. So please go use some of those universal time and date converters that are out there on the internet. There are a number of them, just convert it yourself. Now, theoretically, when you get the invite, if you add the invite to your Outlook calendar, it should convert that for you. I have had situations, particularly right around, when daylight savings time is about to change, where that got screwed up. So apologies if that happens, but that's a Microsoft bug, which can and does occur. Somebody asked how we track who is participating, and that's something that Citrix does. So if you are here participating, then we'll get a report that shows that you were. Now, I should point out there is still a bug with that. If you participate using a tablet or other mobile device, you can participate, but unfortunately you don't get shown as an attendee. So that can create some problems. So if you need PDUs, you need to make sure that you attend via a regular PC. Apologies for that. If you want to see that bug get fixed, which we certainly would like to see that bug get fixed, please contact Citrix. Now, I've got a comment here specific to slide 3. So let's go, whoops. Let's go back to slide 3. Okay, that doesn't work. Let's do it here. Oops. Okay, so comment is from Bill. Good to see you back, Bill. Comment on third slide. Order of feature creation is influenced by level of risk. Yes. Sometimes the level of project risk and quality risk are influenced by the order of feature creation. We have Kanban stack ranks in some of our projects to help visualize this. Well, I guess I can see how the order of feature creation could influence project risk. I'm having a little trouble visualizing how it influences quality risk. So obviously, if you got a lot of dependencies between related user stories, then I can see how that would create some project risks of, you implement things in the wrong order, and then you've got something which is implemented, but we're not able to test it because, say, the user interface isn't available. The feature is there, but the user interface is part of another user story, and so the feature exists but can't be tested. That would be a project risk, and just I'm having a little difficulty seeing how it changes quality risk. Maybe you can follow up, Bill, and give an additional suggestion on that. We have one person mention that they lost sound and had to log out and come back in. It only got that feedback from one person, so apparently it was not a systemic thing. So Stefan says, assessing risk is meaningless for regression testing as all tests are typically run by CI tools each night. So it means risk is assessed for new features or user stories. In that case, impact is usually easier to assess than the technical risk. Are there some good practices or good ways to assess technical risks? So when I was talking about assessing risk from the regression testing point of view, I would agree that the order in which the tests are run in the regression suite is probably meaningless in the sense that as long as they all get run overnight, then who cares, right? Now, you still have to figure out how much testing you need to do. So that there is an assessment, there is a risk assessment involved in the sense of going, well, how much testing do I need to have in my continuous integration suite? And it's usually not a good idea just to say, I'm going to automate every test and throw it in the CI automated test bucket and then rerun that every time I rerun it. With our clients that have tried to do that have found fairly quickly that you get to have you get to a large number of regression tests. You start to have some significant issues related to false positives. In other words, tests that fail even though there's not actually a problem with the software, and some other issue that's come up that needs to be addressed. You can start to run into test maintenance problems. The value of a test, the value of running an automated test can be less than zero. The cost of running an automated test is never less than zero. It's always greater than zero. And so, you have to evaluate from a risk point of view of, is the risk mitigation that I'm going to get out of this automated regression test worth what ultimately it's going to cost to have it in there? So I would say that there is value in doing that assessment, doing a risk assessment. But I think what you're saying here, you're talking about technical risk. I think you're talking about the likelihood of failure of a regression test, level of technical risk associated with a regression test. And that's going to change as time goes on. And one of the things that it makes sense to do is to look at your regression test results over time and prune those tests. So, if there are tests where apparently the technical risk is very low because they never fail, then you have to look at it and go, okay, well, if this is a high enough impact, it's worth keeping the test even though it never fails. But if it's not a very high impact risk item associated with this, maybe we want to prune this out. So, having some sort of assessment of the level of likelihood and impact associated with the regression tests, and periodically evaluating that and trimming those, pruning those tests out, some of those tests out as they get less and less worth doing, is definitely a good practice. Because I was just talking to a couple people last week that were struggling with this very problem of, we've accumulated a bunch of automated regression tests and we're getting to the point where it's starting to overwhelm us. Let's see. Jonathan says, what foundational skill set do you think helps young QA analysts become better at risk analysis? Black box techniques, test plan documentation, defect management. Thanks. Well, I think you really need to be, if you're a tester. So I think this gets to the issue that I was talking about with this slide here. So I've got testers now who are used to being just individual contributors, not used to driving these kind of typical traditional test manager tasks, like doing quality risk analysis, like devising a test plan, which is a whole different discussion about test plans in Agile, estimation, all of these kinds of things. So you're basically putting your finger on an issue, a larger issue, which is Agile teams are supposed to be self-directed and self-organized, right? So this means that a lot of stuff that would typically be done by a manager in a traditional lifecycle model, whether the development manager or test manager, is now getting pushed down to the individual contributor level. So, really, Jonathan, what you have to do is educate the individual testers in test management skills, because that's what they're going to have to know. They're, in order to be effective as a tester in an Agile team, you can't just go running to the test manager every time something comes up that requires some amount of management thinking. That's going to overwhelm the test manager, and it also is contrary to the whole concept of the self-directed and self-organizing team. So, certainly the kind of test management skills that are discussed in the ISTQB foundation level is absolutely necessary. But I would say, probably we want to take that up to the next level of the advanced test manager, becomes appropriate, or, the kind of techniques the kind of management techniques that I discussed in my book, Managing the Testing Process. I mean, people need to be aware of that. Individual testers need to be aware of that. So it puts the individual tester in a much more interesting spot in being in Agile, in the sense that they not only do they have to become more savvy with respect to test management techniques, because they're effectively playing that role within the Agile team, but also there's generally a need for them to become more technical than they perhaps were in the past. So being able to ideally read the code that the programmers are writing the product in, being able to advise the programmers on things like code coverage tools and level of code coverage being achieved and what that means. Participating in a lot of automation activities. And there's a lot of technical skills that are needed in addition. So, this tends to, transition to Agile tends to really challenge the testers' skill needs, and the test manager's ability to grow the team into that, into those skills, also very much challenged. And one of our clients even renamed their test managers as coaches in this situation, because what they found was that so much of the traditional test management activities, so many of those had devolved down into the individual contributors, that what the test managers really had to do was be there, helping them, teaching them, coaching them on all of these new things that they had to be able to do. Thomas asks, I've never heard of planning poker. Could you explain it in a bit more detail? Okay, so planning poker is a implementation of something that's called the Delphic Oracle estimation technique. So in the Delphic Oracle estimation technique, what happens is that let's say that we're going to go through and we're going to estimate a bunch of tasks on a project. It's letting aside what the project is, what the tasks are, but we've got tasks. We want to estimate those. We have a group of people who have the appropriate experience to do the estimation. They're going to be involved in doing the project. We want to tap their collective wisdom and experience to come up with the estimate. Now, so one of the things we could do is just do an open-ended brainstorming session where we put up task and go, all right, so how long do we think this is going to take? And everybody just kind of shouts out their thoughts. The problem with that is that when people do that, they just shout out their thoughts. The first person to say what they think, that number, it's 25 person hours. That number becomes what's called an anchor. So you have it's referred to as an anchoring problem. Basically, then from then on, for the rest of the discussion about that task, everybody's going to be reacting to the 25 person hour number. To avoid that, what you do in Delphic Oracle estimation is that people are asked to estimate the tasks, but they're asked to write them down on a piece of paper, and they don't show that to anybody. And then once everybody has finished doing that, you have a point where everybody reveals their number to everybody else. And if they all agree, then okay, fine, we use that number. If there are disagreements, then what you do is you identify the person who's the high estimator, the one who thinks it's going to take the longest, and the person who's the low estimator, the one who thinks it's going to take the shortest amount of time, and you ask each of them to explain their reasoning. Having done that, you then go through this process again. So again, everybody estimates, write it down. You do another reveal, potentially do another round of, the high and low estimators explaining, and if there's no agreement, and then you'll try it a third time. Usually that's where it's cut off. So after the third time, if you don't have convergence, then you have some way of tie breaking. There are different rules for that. You can use the average. You can use the median. You can use the mode. So there are different suggestions for that. Now, so basically, planning poker is Delphic Oracle estimation, but the term planning poker, I believe, came from a guy named Mike Cohen, who is an Agile consultant. And if you go to his website, Mountain Goat Software, all one word, you can find out more about his particular implementation of it, and he's got even playing cards and so forth to be used to do this. But you don't have to do anything more sophisticated than what I just described. There are various ways that people go about doing this estimation. It can be done just using traditional person hours, and we have plenty of clients that do that. Cohen on his website talks about something called story points, which are relative sizes using a Fibonacci series. We've got one or two clients that have done that. You can go at it either way, and either way you can use the story points or the person hours to establish what your velocity, actually is. What you can actually get through. And again, so if you want to see more about planning poker as envisioned, by Mike Cohen, just go out to Mountain Goat Software and take a look at that. Maria says unexpected changes are the most significant contributor to finding high risks. But Agile says that we should be flexible to changes. So how do you balance that flexibility with the risk communication and plan mitigations? Well, if you are in the middle of an iteration and there's a significant change that is, dropped effectively out of nowhere on a particular user story, that's obviously going to be very disruptive. You'll have to go back. You'll have to reassess the likelihood and impact based on the change. That could result in some fairly significant twiddling of the user story, of the risk analysis and of the resulting testing. Now, again, Scrum theory. If you read Schwaber's book on Scrum, he says basically that shouldn't happen. That once the content of an iteration is determined, that the user stories should not be changed. You shouldn't add new user stories and significantly modify the user stories that were already selected. Our experience with our clients is that, yeah, they do change that. So, mostly it's a matter of, making sure that you are included in these discussions about proposed changes during the sprints, so that you're not blindsided by it, and B, that the decision about what changes to make be based in part on what's the level of risk, quality risk associated with that, and how disruptive is that to the testing effort. So, you want to really push to make sure that you've got that level of involvement. Let's see. Alexander asks, if there is a risk analysis added at the beginning of an iteration, how much time should be estimated for this process of risk analysis per sprint? How to estimate this time? It's a minor incremental addition. You're already going to be going through the user stories anyway at the beginning of the sprints. And you're going to be refining the user stories, defining acceptance criteria. So, this is an incremental addition. I would say, if this adds another hour, maybe 2 hours maximum, but probably more like an hour. So really, if it's adding too much time, I would guess that what's happening is you're getting hung up on either arguments about whether something is or is not a risk, in which case you need to get people better educated on how to identify quality risk items, or you're having trouble getting agreement on likelihood and impact ratings, in which case you have a problem with your criteria and they need to be refined. Mary says, is the webinar available for free replay on your site? Yes, it's in the digital library. We record all of these webinars, and they are posted on the digital library. So if you go to the resources tab, the center of the upper center of the home page, and navigate from there to the digital library, you'll find this. It's usually posted within about a week. Jan asks, what is the main difference or main different activities between the risk-based testing and Waterfall and Agile testing? Basically, the main difference is just that in traditional Waterfall life cycles, we do a big upfront risk analysis in parallel with the planning and requirement specification phases, and then periodically adjust that as the project continues. And in Agile, we do a high-level risk analysis during release planning, and the specific risk items are identified repeatedly at the beginning of each iteration. Nikos asks, Rex, could you give some hints about the estimation methods used in Agile testing projects? Thanks in advance. Nikos, I think what I want to do with this request is punt on it. Hopefully you'll be able to attend the December webinar where I'm talking about estimation, and we can get into this in a lot more detail there. I just can't, in the 6 minutes we've got left, I can't give you an answer that's anywhere worth worth listening to. Belina says, I had to drop due to no sound and join again. I assume it will count me. Yeah, hopefully it shows you as an attendee, even though you did drop off. We'll work that out if it didn't. Let's see. Miko says, you say that risk-based testing is a long-proven testing best practice. Are there any studies supporting this claim, or is this statement based on your own experience? By the way, I'm a big fan of risk-based testing. Studies. I'm trying to think if this is one of these things that Capers Jones has looked at or not, whether he's done any analysis of it. The claim that I'm making is it's based on my own experience. Again, as I said, I've been doing this for about 20 years now. I've probably trained personally or through my company and or partners, probably trained in excess of 10,000 people in the technique, I would guess. And I've worked directly with clients to help them implement this technique, well over a dozen clients to, help them launch it. Actually been involved in successful pilot efforts with them. I've done it myself on a number of projects. So yeah, my own experience, and also I've talked to other people who are effectively competitors of mine, who have somewhat different techniques that they've developed, but techniques that are very similar, and they've used them successfully with a large number of clients. Just recently, a company called Test Leaders developed a tool that they're apparently selling like hotcakes that is effectively an implementation of the technique that I just described. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's anecdotal, but there's a lot of anecdotes. But as far as like industry studies, like something like Capers Jones going out and doing analysis of, what percentage of organizations have successfully implemented risk-based testing versus how many tried to implement it and failed, and of those who failed, did it fail because of the way they implemented it, or did it fail because it just didn't give them any value? That's something that somebody else would have to look at. Antonio asks, how do we implement risk-based testing techniques in an environment where most of the testing resources are crowdsourced and planning time is very limited? Be frank with you, I don't know. I'm not sure how exactly you would do that. One of the problems with distributed testing can be centralized in a way that allows you to do risk-based testing and distributed testing or distributed situations. But what you're describing here goes beyond that. We're getting into a situation where there's minimal planning, minimal direct control. So I honestly don't know how you would go about doing it. This could be one of the weaknesses of this. I mean, there was a famous quote from one of the founding fathers, or maybe not founding fathers, kind of thought leader, or at least big talking head. I forget his name, of open source. And he said, given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow, which sounds like a profound statement, but that's like saying that if you take enough shotgun blasts at a piece of cardboard, eventually you'll completely blow out all of the cardboard. And I would say, well, yeah, okay, but, assuming there's a target painted on that cardboard, my goal is not to blow out the entire piece of cardboard. My goal is to put holes right in the center of the target, right? So that's one of the ways that I've explained this to clients before, is that, these kind of just brute force approaches to testing that throw a hell of a lot of resources at it. It's like, using a machine gun or a shotgun where what you really want to do is use a sniper rifle, right? And, put targeted holes exactly where you want to put holes rather than just blasting away at things. So, I don't really know what to say, like how you would go about doing it. Excuse me. Maria asks, if an Agile team never worked with formal risk-based testing to start its implementation, could it be an option to start the risk analysis and the release planning, high level, and then once the team is more mature, move to the iteration planning? Well, that's certainly what you would do, yeah, but what I'm suggesting is that you want to do both. You want to do risk analysis during the release planning at a high level, and then do the more detailed in each iteration plan. I really don't think this technique is not that hard to use. I mean, I've gotten organizations started doing risk-based testing in a week. So, if you want to go that route, it's not a very expensive consulting engagement, but if you've got no money, then there's, like I said, tons of resources out on the RBCS website for free, videos and other kinds of resources that you can look at. So, you should be able to get people to do it. I mean, the thing I worry about with what you're suggesting, Maria, is that I think you would get very little value out of the analysis done in the release planning, and thus you'd never get to the point where people rolled it out to the iteration planning, because the real value is going to come out of doing it at the iteration level. And it's important to keep stakeholders engaged, and the way you're going to do that is by showing them value. And if you don't have any value to show them, this process is going to die. Mary says, for Agile projects and risk-based testing, what challenges do you see with one individual performing tester and test manager role? I think I addressed this, Mary, with respect to Jonathan's question earlier. You asked this question about 5 minutes or 10 minutes before I answered Jonathan's question, so I think I've covered that. Let's see. Terry asked, at the beginning of the session, you stated the presentation is or is not available. Yeah, it's available on the basic library. The slides are, and as I said before, the recorded presentation will be posted. Let's see. I got a question from Irene here, which I think is going to have to be the last question. She says, I'm participating in an Agile-like project, and what we are supposed to do at the moment is a TSA support during unit testing. Later on, we will proceed with the full FST, assuming that's functional system test. I do not know what TSA support. FST testing, functional system testing, and end-to-end testing. What would be the best approach to make sure that what was tested in unit is secured and parked? Do you think we have to retest unit-tested items in the functional system test? Thanks. Well, I'm assuming that you're talking about that the testing is going to happen within the sprints and be focused on the individual items, and then later, after the sprints, you're going to go into more of a full-blown end-to-end system integration, system test type of approach. Some people make fun of this and call this scrummer fall, with a waterfall piece at the end prior to release, and hardening sprints and so forth. Now, in terms of do we have to retest? Well, okay, so there's regression testing, and you want to have a lot of automated regression test support available for you in this process, because it's inherently, there's a lot of regression risk in Agile. But that stuff should be very inexpensive to retest. The question of do we have to go back and do things over again? Well, no. I mean, if you're doing risk-based testing, if you feel like a particular risk from a new development point of view has been adequately mitigated, then it's been adequately mitigated. This is one of the advantages of risk-based testing. If you use it to coordinate all of your testing, is that you won't have to necessarily repeat things. So we've run a little long. Thank you for all of your interesting questions. To close this session, a little bit more about the resources that are available. We run these free webinar sessions once a month. Check our website, rbcs-us.com, to sign up. If you want a special webinar presentation for your company only of this webinar on any other topic, send an email to info@rbcs-us.com or contact us via our website. On our website, you can sign up for our regular free newsletter, which will give you valuable discounts on our services, along with regular newsletter that includes a featured article on software testing and quality and news about what RBCS and its partners are doing. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at RBCS, and on Facebook, we are RBCS-INC. Do remember to check your email over the next couple days. You could be the lucky winner of a free e-learning course from RBCS, and you were registered simply by attending this free event. As I said, check out the basic, advanced, and digital libraries. We have templates and articles and recordings of these webinars out there. You can also subscribe to the RBCS channel on YouTube to see these recorded webinars when they come out. We offer these free resources as a service to the software testing community because at RBCS we are a not just for profit company. Concludes the webinar. Thanks to everyone for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you on future webinars.
Hi, I'm Rex Black, President of RBCS. Welcome to the RBCS YouTube channel. Hey, I hope you enjoy all these free resources that are available here. And do us one favor. We need to keep the lights on, and we need your help to do that. So, when you need testing and quality related services, training, consulting, expert services, you name it, let us be one of the bidders on that next job. We don't expect to get all of your business, but we'd like to get a chance. Thanks, and enjoy the shows.